With the magic loop method of knitting in the round, you can knit anything from the small circumference of a glove pinky to an incredible Hulk-sized sweater on the same size circular needle. And if you need fewer needles, you'll have more money to spend on yarn. But to begin the magic loop cast on, you cast on like you would for any other project. So I'm just going to do the knitted cast on here because it's quick, and going to demonstrate with a 20 stitch circumference. So this could be like a child's mitten size. That cord is getting in my way. Okay. So cast on your total number of stitches, 2, 4, 5. Once you get your whole cast on done, slide them, well, you can count them on the needle or slide them down to the cord and count them. Find the halfway point, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and bend your cable and pull a loop of cable up. So now you have half of the stitches, if I slide them up onto the needles, on one needle and half of the stitches on the other needle. And make sure that your stitches are not twisted. So I like to lay my needles flat like this. So let me do that again. So they were like this, and I like to lay them flat like this to look at the span between the needles here, because sometimes, especially if you've laid your project down, that can get twisted. And if it does, when you lay them flat, that twist will be obvious. So let me untwist them. Okay, this is where we started. I'm going to lay them flat, and you can see that looks nice and consistent across there. So we're going to point them up in the right direction again, and you'll see here the working yarn is on my left needle. So when you're knitting in the round, your working yarn always has to be on the right needle. So I'm going to turn my needles around, get that working yarn on the right. I always say if it's not right, it's wrong. That working yarn, when you're knitting in the round, is always coming off of your right needle. So if you ever put your work down and you're not sure which direction you were going, hold the needle with the working yarn in your right hand and you'll be going in the right direction. All right, now we've established that the working yarn's on the right. We're going to pull that needle out so that those stitches slide down onto the cord. And we have our working yarn here. It doesn't matter if you hold the working yarn in your right hand or your left hand. I hold mine in my left, but if you hold yours in your right, hold it like you normally do, and start knitting according to your pattern. And when we get to the end of that first half, we have the stitches we just knit on the needle and the other stitches down here on the cord. So that's what it looks like. So we're going to slide those stitches that are on the cord up onto the needle. So now all the stitches are on the needles, and the needle that has the working yarn attached to it, so the working yarn is coming out of this stitch right here on my right needle. That's the needle now we're going to pull out. Those stitches are going to go down onto the cord. And again with that working yarn, and like I said, if you hold it in your right hand, that's fine. I'll show you what that looks like. We're going to start knitting the second half of our round. Now sometimes the stitches are not divided in half. Sometimes you'll have, say, 20 stitches on the first half of the round and 30 stitches on the second half of the round, because the pattern dictates that you need to do that, and that's fine. Because, for example, if it was a cable pattern, you might need to do that because there's a cable that spans where your stitches are divided. So you need to have all of the cable stitches on one needle or the other in order to complete that pattern, and that's fine. You can have a different number of stitches on each needle. Okay, here I am again at the end of my first round. I knit the first half of the stitches. They're down here on the cord. I just finished knitting the second stitch, half of the stitches here on my needle. I'm going to slide all of the stitches back up onto the needles so that I've got half on one needle, half on the other needle. And again, when I say half, I'm using that term loosely. So some of the stitches are on one needle, some are on the other needle. It doesn't have to be exactly half and half. Just make sure you don't have your stitches twisted, just like knitting in the round. If you've knit in the round in any other method, you always have to be careful these first several rounds that you don't have your stitches twisted. At this point, I like to place a beginning of the round marker actually in my knitting, because if I put it on my needle, I tend to lose them. They fly off my needle when I get to the round. So now we're going to find the needle that has the working yarn attached to it. That's this needle. Pull that needle out and continue knitting in the round. We're going to knit down the first half. When we get to the end of the first half, we'll slide all the stitches back up onto the needles again, pull out the needle with the working yarn, and continue down the second half. And that is how you knit in the round any size circumference using the magic loop method of knitting.